Hello there, my beautiful internet friends. Welcome back to Trauma Talk. Thanks so much for joining me here today. I wanted to talk about something that is pretty near and dear to my heart this evening, and that's the idea of whose life circumstances are severe enough for them to qualify for having mental illness. What qualifies you for being able to say that you struggle with a mental illness or a mental disorder? Who's deserving enough, which is a bizarre way of thinking about it, to have a mental illness or to talk about that? And if you have been on my channel before, you probably know my answer to most of these questions, but I think this is really important to talk about, especially in light of recent events. There have been a lot of videos on a bunch of different commentary channels covering a lady by the name of Shallon Lester. She's here on YouTube and she has a pretty significant YouTube following and has said some truly abhorrent things when it comes to mental health, ignorant to say the least. And one of the things that she said in one of her videos was basically, oh, you're a white straight male and you're dealing with anxiety or depression? Sure. And then she goes on to qualify it with like, I'm sure some of them are. But that statement, I think, hits at the core of what, unfortunately, a lot of people dealing in ignorance about mental health might think. That your life circumstances or your position or your privileges or whatever it is somehow are a gateway to being allowed to deal with anxiety or depression or any kind of mental illness or mental disorder. So let's talk about that. I'm going to talk about this specifically as it applies to depression and anxiety and PTSD simply because those are the things that I personally have dealt with and I feel like I have some authority to talk on simply from my own life experience and nothing more. But the idea that if your life is going well, if things are looking good for you, if you have a couple dollars in the bank or food on the table, that you really have no reason to be depressed or anxious or struggling because so many other people have it worse and those people are more deserving of dealing with mental illness, I guess, is sort of the sentiment I often hear. And I think this is a really dangerous and a harmful idea to hold on to. And I know in my previous life, I probably thought similar things before I was a little bit more educated and then unfortunately personally dealt with mental illness. It's really easy to think that if things are going well for you, you should be okay. You should generally be all right. But I think you don't have to look very far to prove that idea wrong. For instance, look at celebrities and rock stars who have very unfortunately lost their lives to suicide. They have, from the outside, everything going for them, right? They have fame, they have attention, they have the love of a lot of people, they probably have money, they have like everything a person could want, right? Except that they didn't, except that there was something that was so deeply hurt or missing or something that led them into very dark places. The same can be said for so many of us. Our life circumstances do not determine our mental health. They absolutely have an impact. But to suggest that someone is white, straight, male, and in America should never deal with anxiety or depression is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. So real quick before I go on, let me just clarify that if you fall into that category, please do not feel like those are not things that you are allowed or qualified to struggle with or deal with or face, because mental illness does not discriminate who it affects. It can hit and affect you if you are at the top of life and doing frickin' fantastic, or if you are at the pits of the low and the low and barely struggling to put food on the table and survive. It just affects people. What things look like from the outside is rarely indicative of what's really going on. We like to think that we can make judgments about people and people's situations based on what we can externally see, but that's so inaccurate and so rarely ever the case. It kind of reminds me of this picture I have in my head when my house burned down in the Black Forest fire. When we actually went back out to see the ashes of our house, the remains of it, we were driving through our neighborhood, and the weirdest thing was seeing what houses were still standing and which ones weren't. It was like the fire just picked and choose different things to take. You would see a house burned to ashes, and I'm not kidding, a shed a few feet away that was still standing. It just was completely random in what it destroyed and how it destroyed. It didn't discriminate. It just took things randomly, and some things were absolutely wrecked and some things looked perfect and still standing, even though it happened in the same environment. It was actually really bizarre to see, and I feel like that's kind of how mental illness works. It just sometimes happens. Oftentimes there are things that are contributing, of course, but that does not mean that if your outside circumstances seem like they're okay, that for any reason you are disqualified from dealing with mental health struggles. This narrative, I think, stops people from getting help more often than we would like to think. Having people tell you that you should be fine, that you shouldn't be struggling with depression or anxiety or PTSD or whatever it is so very harmful, because it plays right into all of the shame that you generally already feel for struggling, for having a hard time. Speaking for myself, dealing with depression, I can't tell you how many times I have internally turned to like self-hatred and frustration with who I was, because why couldn't I just pull myself out of this? I have a great family. I have good friends. I shouldn't be dealing with this. I should just snap out of it, right? Unfortunately, that's not how this works. Unfortunately, it's so much more complex than that. And thinking that you have to reach a certain level in life or not reach that certain level in life or whatever it is to somehow be deserving enough to talk about or to struggle with mental illness is so far off base, is so wrong. It doesn't matter where you're from or what your background is. Mental illness can affect you, and there is no shame in that whatsoever. Thinking that only certain groups of people can legitimately struggle with anxiety, depression, PTSD, whatever it is very, very inaccurate. And it doesn't take looking very far to figure that out for yourself. If you look at statistics, if you look at who is affected, so many different people get affected. And just because things look like they're going good for you in life doesn't mean that that fixes everything that you're struggling with, everything that's going on internally. I honestly wish it did. I feel like that's what society kind of tells us, that if you get money and success and whatever it is, that you're going to be doing great. But unfortunately, again, you don't have to look very far to realize that those narratives are very false. That doesn't fix deep hurt. That doesn't fix mental struggles. Maybe it helps some people, certainly. But like I said, mental illness does not discriminate who it affects. So regardless of your circumstances, your gender, your race, your background, whatever it is that someone could pull in as a reason for or against being allowed to deal with mental illness, I want to tell you right now that they are incorrect. It doesn't matter. If you are struggling, you are struggling, and that is 100% valid. Please, please know that. Please know that you are absolutely deserving to seek out help. There's no shame in that. Some people may suggest that there is, but they are simply wrong, and there's a great community of people out here willing to support you. It's not easy to struggle. It's not easy to reach out and find help, especially if people are telling you that you shouldn't. But I can assure you that it's worth it. I can assure you it's worth your time, your energy, your effort, even if it feels meaningless and worthless, and even if you are in a really dark place. There is another side to what you are struggling with, to what you are dealing with, and there are people who can help you get there. So please do not let any narratives of who's allowed or qualified to deal with mental illness permeate your consciousness, as difficult as that may be, because they are simply wrong. Mental illness does not discriminate who it affects. And regardless of who you are or your current life circumstances, please know that that's valid. And there's no reason to feel bad on top of struggling because life circumstances are looking your way or going your way. I think that can prevent people from getting the help that they need because, hey, look, things are going well for me. But that's not always the case. And things going well for you based on what society tells us things going well means doesn't always mean that you're gonna be okay. Sometimes we need to reach out and find help. Oftentimes things are much harder than they seem from the outside, so please don't let other people's judgments of your ability to struggle, which is such a ridiculous thing to even think about, dissuade you from participating in finding help, in investing in yourself, in healing, because I promise you it's out there. Because it doesn't matter. If you're struggling, and that's valid. And I'm gonna leave it there today. Thank you so much for listening. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, I read all comments. I don't always have a chance to respond, but if you write something, I will get it one way or another. So thank you. Thanks again for listening, for being here, for choosing to continue to fight through another day. You're a rock star. I hope wherever in the world you are hanging in there, and I really appreciate you choosing to spend a few minutes of your day here with me, chilling. You could be anywhere in the world doing anything, and you chose to spend a few minutes with me, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. I love you guys. I'm thinking about you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.